My name is Julia, and the last time I felt truly safe in my parents' house, I was 9 years old, right before they blamed me for something I didn't do and never apologized. Now, decades later, their silence has turned into something colder: exclusion, erasure, betrayal. But this time, I won't swallow it. This time, I'm writing my own ending. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. It was one of those blistering Texas afternoons where the cicadas sang like a choir and the air stuck to your skin like wet gauze. I remember the sunlight pouring through the kitchen window in sharp gold angles, cutting across the tiled floor like spotlight beams. That day, I was 9, barefoot, and holding back tears the way only a child trained in being good knows how. The lamp had shattered in the hallway, our mother's antique blue and white porcelain one, the one she always said was from the old country, though no one could ever confirm which one. The moment the crash rang out, every adult in the house froze, and then they came running. "Julia!" My mother's voice cracked like a whip, her heels clacking behind her as she stormed into the hallway. "What did you do?" I opened my mouth, but the words caught behind my tongue like thorns. I hadn't even been near the lamp. I had been in the living room folding napkins, badly, but obediently, while my cousins Nathan and Leela chased each other like wild dogs through the hallway. The cousins. Always the cousins. Nathan and Leela were visiting for the summer, children of my father's sister who had a permanent passport to chaos. They were the kind of kids who never got blamed, who laughed at consequences and always got ice cream after tantrums. Even now, I can still hear their giggles, soft and sly, echoing down the hallway as they hid behind the guest room door. I began, my voice barely audible. "You what?" My father's voice boomed down the stairs. His boots hit each step like accusations. "That lamp cost money, Julia. What were you thinking?" I hadn't been thinking, because I hadn't done anything. But try telling that to 2 furious parents already decided on your guilt. Then came the moment I didn't expect, the only bright flicker in that suffocating scene. "Leave her alone!" A boy's voice cut through the tension like a thread snapping. "She didn't do it." It was Ethan, my brother, only a year older, but always the taller one, the louder one, the brave one. He stood in the hallway like a soldier stepping between enemy lines, his fists clenched and his eyes blazing. "She didn't touch that lamp. Nathan was sword fighting with a broomstick again. I saw him." There was a pause. A long one. My mother blinked, thrown off her rhythm. My father looked past me toward the guest room door. Then my mother's voice, quieter but no softer, snapped. "Ethan, this isn't your business. Go back to your room." "But it is," he said, barely whispering now. "She's my sister." And just like that, the heat in the room shifted. Not gone, but refocused, now with Ethan in its path. I remember staring at the floor, my cheeks burning, unsure if I should feel grateful or guilty. I didn't even get a chance to thank him. My parents marched off in a fury of dismissals, still convinced of my guilt, their punishment more silence than scolding this time. And I was left with the echo of Ethan's defense and the cold slap of injustice. That day became something like a splinter in my memory, small, but impossible to forget. I didn't cry then. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But I remember whispering to myself that night, under my quilt with the stitched daisies, one day, they'll know I didn't do it. One day, I won't let anyone blame me for what I didn't break. Funny how one day turned into years. And funnier still, how that same flicker of love from Ethan, that fierce loyalty, would come back to haunt me. Because decades later, it wouldn't be a broken lamp I'd be blamed for. It would be a broken family. And this time, I wouldn't walk away quietly. Years later, that same dining room, once full of sun-faded wallpaper and mismatched chairs, had transformed. My mother had renovated it when the granite obsession hit suburban Texas, so now the table gleamed with polished edges and the chairs matched in sleek uniformity. But no amount of elegance could change the way I still felt small in that space. Ethan was late, as usual, but when he finally swept in, his arms full of grocery bags and his eyes dancing, I caught a familiar glint. "Sorry, traffic," he said, kissing Mom on the cheek. "Hope y'all didn't start without me." Behind him, like a second thought, stepped Amanda. She was, beautiful in that kind of symmetrical way that makes you feel instantly disheveled. Auburn hair tied in a tight, no-nonsense bun, sharp cheekbones, heels that didn't blink at gravel. Her expression was polite, but her eyes scanned the room like she was already bored. "This is Amanda," Ethan said, putting a hand gently on her back. "My fiancé." My mother rushed in first with a flourish of hugs and exclamations, asking about dresses and venues. My father offered a handshake like he was interviewing a new accountant. Then Ethan turned to me, grinning. "And this is Julia, my sister, the one I always tell you about." I extended my hand, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Nice to meet you, Amanda." She smiled, but it stopped short of her eyes. "You too. Ethan talks about you a lot." Something in the way she said a lot made my skin tighten, like I'd walked into a room where the temperature had dropped by 10 degrees. Dinner was awkward in that way only family dinners can be when everyone is trying too hard. We had lasagna, my mother's favorite for guests, paired with a forced conversation about the wedding. Amanda didn't talk much, but when she did, her tone was clipped, like every word was weighed before it was released. "So, Julia, Ethan says you manage projects." Amanda asked across the table, her fork tracing idle circles in the sauce. "Yes," I replied, setting down my glass. "For a consulting firm, mostly tech infrastructure for hospitals." "Oh," she said, nodding. "That sounds complicated." It wasn't the word, it was the way she said it. That slight pause, the tiniest lift of her brows, a polite dismissal disguised as a compliment. "Sometimes," I said, "but rewarding, keeps me busy." "Well, that's good. Everyone needs something to do." There it was again, that distant civility, the tone of someone who had already formed an opinion and was just humoring protocol. Ethan tried to smooth things over with a joke, nudging Amanda about her inability to set calendar reminders without him. But every time I spoke, she went still, her posture sharp, her eyes unreadable. I caught my father watching me once, like he wasn't sure if I'd done something wrong or if he just felt like I might. When Amanda excused herself to take a call midway through dessert, Ethan leaned over toward me. "She's nervous," he said quietly. "New people make her tense." "She seems fine with everyone else," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. He winced. "She's just protective, you're important to me. Maybe that makes her feel like she has to compete." "She doesn't." "I know that," he said quickly. "But you know how it is, families. Layers and layers of weird feelings no one ever explains." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to ask why Amanda seemed to bristle at my presence, why her eyes narrowed when I spoke about work, or laughed at one of Ethan's old stories. But instead, I just said, "I hope she warms up. It's going to be a long road to the altar otherwise." Ethan chuckled, but something about his smile looked rehearsed. After dinner, Amanda rejoined us like nothing had happened, laughing at something my mother said about flower arrangements. But when she caught my eye across the room, her expression hardened for a split second, just long enough to be certain it wasn't my imagination. That night, as I drove back to my condo, I replayed every interaction like a forensic tape. Did I say something wrong? Was it the way I spoke? The way Ethan still leaned toward me when he talked, like we shared our own language? No, I'd been polite, friendly even. But I had seen something unmistakable in Amanda's eyes. Rivalry. And something colder beneath it, ownership. Like she already considered Ethan hers, and I was a legacy she hadn't agreed to inherit. I didn't say anything to my parents about it. They were already in full wedding planning mode, their excitement buzzing louder than any concern I could raise. But in the quiet of my car, hands still on the steering wheel in the driveway, I whispered to myself something I hadn't said in years. Don't let this become another silence. Because I remembered what it felt like to be blamed. I remembered what it felt like to be erased. And this time, I was watching very closely. It was one of those golden early evenings in late March Texas spring, where the breeze still held a chill, but the sky pretended it was already July. Ethan and I stood on the back porch of our childhood home, leaning against the rail, the horizon melting orange behind the oak trees. Dinner was over, Amanda was inside helping Mom with dishes, and the air between Ethan and me was that easy silence we used to share growing up. For a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. "I missed this," he said, taking a sip of the beer he'd brought outside. "Just the two of us." I nodded, wrapping my sweater a little tighter. Me too. He rocked slightly on his heels, glancing toward the screen door to make sure it was shut. Then he cleared his throat. Hey, can I talk to you about something a little delicate? That was never a good opening. I turned toward him, wary but listening. It's about the wedding, he said, eyes avoiding mine now. Amanda's folks, they're, in a bit of a tight spot financially. Her dad's been out of work for a few months and, well, the venue we booked needs a deposit, like this week. He rubbed the back of his neck, that nervous tick he'd had since he was 10. I already offered to cover it, he rushed to say. But then this Sahara gig came up and now I have to leave in a few days. So I figured maybe you could help, just temporarily. I'll pay you back. You're the only one I trust with this kind of thing. There it was, the ask. I smiled automatically, years of being the dependable one, the fixer, the bridge between crises. How much are we talking? 6,000, he said quickly, as if speed would soften the number. I know it's a lot. And I'd never ask if I wasn't about to get this field bonus when I get back. You'll have it by summer, I swear. I stared out at the woods. A familiar tightness settled into my chest, not quite anger, not quite regret, just weariness. Of course he asked me, not our parents, not Amanda's siblings, me, because Julia always comes through. Julia always has the savings account. Julia always says yes. Still, I nodded. Okay, I'll help. Ethan's face lit up, and for a moment he looked just like the boy who stood up for me all those years ago when the lamp crashed and the truth got ignored. You will. Thank you, Jules. Seriously, Amanda will be so relieved. I didn't want to tell her I was going to ask you until I was sure. That stung in a way I wasn't ready to examine. I'm glad I could help, I said, trying to keep my voice even. And I was glad to help him. But beneath the surface, a ripple of unease began to spread. Not because of the money, I had it. I'd worked hard, saved hard. That wasn't the issue. It was something else. Something in the way Amanda didn't even know about this request. Something in the way Ethan's voice shifted when he talked about her, like he was already smoothing over landmines. And something deeper, older, that reminded me how often I'd bent myself to accommodate other people's comfort. Later that night, I transferred the money. No hesitation. Just a simple wire from one account to another labeled venue deposit. No fanfare. No confirmation text from Amanda. Just a short message from Ethan. You're a lifesaver. Can't wait to see you in the front row. I should have felt warm, important included. But instead, as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan's spinning shadows across my walls, I felt a quiet dread. Not fear. Just the creeping sense that I'd stepped into something more complicated than a brother's simple request. Because Amanda didn't like me. And now, I was funding the altar she might use to push me out of the picture entirely. The house was too quiet without Ethan. He'd left 3 days ago for a 6-week assignment in the Sahara. Something about mineral formations and satellite data that sounded thrilling in the way only Ethan could make science sound. He left with sand-colored duffels and his usual last-minute panic, grinning as he promised to FaceTime whenever the signal allowed. But the silence he left behind wasn't peaceful, because Amanda stayed. At first, she said it was temporary, just a few days to get things sorted before she moved into her own place. It's closer to work, she said, even though she worked remotely. I don't want to be alone in our apartment while Ethan's gone, she added, even though the lease hadn't started yet. My parents, of course, encouraged it. She's family now, my mother chirped. What's the harm? And I didn't argue, not right away. The first 2 days were tolerable. Quiet dinners, awkward small talk, polite exchanges. But by the 3rd morning, the gloves were off. It started with the laundry. I'd come downstairs to find my clothes, my work dresses, my gym gear, even my delicate blouses piled in a basket. Amanda stood in front of the washing machine, humming to herself, wearing one of my university sweatshirts. Oh, she said when she saw me. Hope you don't mind. I needed to wash a few things and your stuff was just sitting there. It was mid-cycle, I said calmly. My load wasn't finished. She blinked, feigning innocence. Really? Maybe the machine's broken. I didn't respond. I just picked up my clothes, still damp, and carried them back upstairs. The next day, it was the guest bathroom. She'd taken over the cabinet, spreading her products like she was unpacking for a hotel stay. Serums, rollers, bottles labeled in French. My toothbrush had been relocated to the downstairs powder room without a word. Then came the schedule clashes. I worked from home 3 days a week. Amanda knew this. Still, she chose to blast music in the living room during my conference calls, take loud FaceTimes in the hallway, and leave half-eaten yogurt cups in the sink like she was marking territory with dairy. And I stayed silent, at first, until the morning of the car incident. I had a meeting in Austin, an important one with a hospital client who was notoriously difficult. I'd prepped for days, woke up early, got dressed in my sharpest suit, grabbed my laptop and keys only to discover my car was missing from the driveway. Gone. I panicked, called the police, called a tow company, started pacing the front porch with my phone pressed to my ear when Amanda strolled up the street with an iced coffee and my keys in her hand. "Oh," she said, not even apologetic. "I figured you were working from home today. My car's low on gas and yours was blocking mine in. Hope that's okay." It was okay. I stood there in stunned silence, the sun beating down on my blazer, the seconds ticking toward my now-missed meeting. "This isn't your house to command," I said quietly. My voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a slap. Amanda froze, her smile faltered. "Excuse me. You heard me. You don't take my car without asking. You don't rearrange the house. You're a guest here, not the owner." Her face turned red, first with embarrassment, then with something uglier. "Ethan said I could stay here," she snapped. "And your mom told me to make myself at home. Well, I live here, not Ethan, not my mother, me." There it was, my voice, clear, sharp, final. Amanda opened her mouth, probably to argue, but then shut it. She handed me the keys like she was dropping something distasteful. Then she stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind her. I stood in the driveway, heart pounding. I was late. I was furious. I was done being the doormat. Later that evening, the silence in the house was thick enough to chew. We didn't speak at dinner. We didn't even make eye contact. She made herself a salad and disappeared back into the guest room. But I didn't feel bad. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt proud. Not because I'd won an argument, but because I didn't abandon myself to keep the peace. I didn't tell Ethan what happened. Not yet. I needed to sit with it first. To feel what it was like to choose myself, even in a house where I was being edged out by a woman who had only just arrived but already acted like I was the interloper. Amanda wasn't just staying. She was testing the waters of power. But so was I by the end of the first week. The war had gone cold. No more slammed doors. No more hijacked cars, just silence, the curated kind. The kind that made the clinking of forks sound like thunder. Amanda had stopped making direct jabs. She didn't need to anymore. Now she communicated in subtler, sharper ways, via side glances, muttered remarks, and deliberate exclusions. The kind of hostility that could be denied with a sweet smile and a shrug. "You're imagining things," she could say. And technically, she'd be right. There were no outbursts, no obvious crimes, just erosion. Quiet, steady erosion. Dinner became a ritual in tension. My mother would set the table as if nothing was wrong. Amanda would sit prim and poised, offering stories about wedding colors and boutique drama. My father would chuckle at her anecdotes like she was already blood. And me, I sat there like furniture, silent, watching. I'd learned something by then, an old lesson relearned. The way to survive in a house where your existence is being erased is not to yell louder, but to remember everything. So I began to write. At first, it was just notes on my phone. Then pages in a spiral notebook tucked between cookbooks. I documented every comment, every strange interaction, every shift in my parents' tone when Amanda spoke. Like Tuesday, when Amanda mentioned she was feeling unsupported in the household. "I just think some people don't understand how hard it is to be in love," she said at the table, staring pointedly at her steamed broccoli. My father, who once told me to toughen up when I cried over my first heartbreak, reached over and patted her hand. "You're doing your best, sweetheart. We see you." I swallowed my bite of chicken hard. Later that evening, I overheard my mother in the hallway offering Amanda one of her vintage pins for something blue and promising to help pay for her shoes. "A little gift," she said gently. "Since things have been tense lately, you deserve a little joy." Deserve. That word stuck to the roof of my mouth like dry toast. No one offered me joy when I was crawling toward burnout at work last year. No one offered gifts when I was the one paying deposits, folding laundry, fielding family obligations. I had given so much to this family that I'd started mistaking it for a full-time job. Now I was being replaced. And I realized this wasn't about Amanda being difficult. This was about my family making room for her by shrinking me, a slow phase-out, a quiet reassignment. It should have devastated me. Instead, it clarified everything. Because the more invisible I became, the more sharply I saw. Amanda was laying the groundwork. She played the victim with finesse, subtle sighs, tired eyes, martyred comments about just wanting peace. And every time she did, someone handed her more power. My parents started consulting her about Sunday dinner menus, not me. They laughed louder at her jokes. They began telling stories I was part of, but replacing me in the retelling. Once, my father told a story about Ethan's high school prank and said Amanda had probably heard this one already, even though I was the one who helped plan it. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so painful, so I kept writing. I logged how Amanda would place empty coffee mugs on the counter right after I cleaned the sink. I wrote down the comments like, "Some people just don't know when to let go, and not everyone was raised to be warm." I noted how my mother now texted Amanda to confirm dinner times, even though I lived in the house. None of it was outright cruelty. It was strategy, and I began to respond in kind, not with conflict, but with precision. I started setting quiet boundaries. I moved my favorite dishes to a high shelf only I could reach. I locked my office drawer. I began meal prepping on Wednesdays instead of Fridays, silently reclaiming space that had been slowly co-opted. Amanda noticed, and she didn't like it. She started asking passive questions. "Did you move the salt again? Weren't you supposed to be gone today?" "Oh, you still live here," I answered in monosyllables. She was baiting me, hoping I'd snap, hoping I'd give her the outburst she could parade around as proof. But I didn't. I just documented everything. Because something inside me whispered, this will matter later, this all matters. And I started to feel something strange, not fear. Not sadness, focus. I didn't know yet what I was preparing for. I just knew I was done being the one who swallowed her voice for the sake of family harmony. Let Amanda charm the dinner table. Let my parents believe what they needed to. I had the truth, and I was holding it close, ready. It was a Wednesday morning when I finally booked the appointment. I didn't tell anyone, not my mother, not Ethan, and certainly not Amanda. I drove to Austin in silence, hands tight around the wheel, as if afraid my resolve might slip through my fingers if I loosened my grip even slightly. Dr. Langley's office was tucked into a cozy bungalow just off South Congress, painted the kind of sage green that felt like exhaling. The front desk was soft-spoken and smelled like lemongrass. No loud ticking clocks, no overbright lights, just stillness. I remember thinking, this is the first quiet that doesn't feel like punishment. Dr. Langley greeted me with a calm smile and eyes that didn't rush. She looked like someone who had read a lot of books but also knew how to plant tomatoes. When she asked what brought me in, I hesitated, not because I didn't know, but because I'd spent so long convincing myself it wasn't enough. I didn't have a diagnosis. I hadn't been hit or screamed at. No one had stormed out. My family still invited me to dinner, smiled at me, texted me, and yet I was hollowing out inside. "My family treats me like a piece of furniture that can also pay deposits," I said eventually. She nodded. "Tell me more." I told her everything. Not all at once, but in waves, the wedding, the move-in, the shrinking space I was supposed to be grateful for. The lamp incident from my childhood, how my parents never apologized, how Ethan's voice had once been my shelter. And now he doesn't answer my texts right away. He says Amanda's stressed, that I should be patient, but I've been patient for 30 years. Dr. Langley leaned back, quiet for a moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "You've been trained to whisper when they shout." That sentence sat with me like warm tea in a cracked mug. "I don't shout," I replied softly. She smiled gently. "That's the problem." We talked about silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind women are taught to master. How being easygoing often becomes a cage. How kindness, weaponized against you, starts to feel like complicity. "You know what I notice," she said in our second session. You never say they're wrong. You always say maybe you overreacted or maybe you misunderstood. Where did you learn to erase yourself that gently? I didn't have an answer, but I did start to write. Not just incident logs anymore. Not Amanda's cruelty or my mother's favoritism. I started journaling for me. Raw, unfiltered, clumsy entries at first. Then sharper, clearer. I wrote about what it felt like to be the good one. To carry expectations like luggage nobody thanked you for. To be the helper, the emotional babysitter, the background to everyone else's drama. One night, I opened an old photo album and saw myself at 12, standing behind Ethan at a science fair, holding his prize ribbon while he posed for the camera. In the corner of the photo, I was smiling, but I remembered the truth. I had also been in the fair. I'd painted a mural of the Texas Hill Country and won third place in the art category. They hadn't taken a picture of that. I closed the album, pressed the cover tight, and whispered, "I was there too." That became a mantra. I was there too. At dinner, when Amanda laughed with my parents and retold stories like she'd always been part of them, I repeated it in my head. I was there too. When my mother asked Amanda to choose napkin colors and didn't ask for my opinion, I reminded myself, I was there too. The next time Dr. Langley asked how I was doing, I said something I hadn't said in years. "I don't want to be tolerated, I want to be seen." She smiled. "That's a good start." She gave me an exercise. To write a list of things I'd tolerated that felt like love, but weren't. I called it my list of false peace. Being blamed so no one else had to be. Being quiet so others could speak louder. Saying yes to keep the mood calm. Giving money instead of asking for space. Smiling while being erased. Each line felt like a small rebellion. I realized something during those sessions. Not all family pain comes in explosive scenes. Sometimes it arrives dressed in politeness. In polite dismissals. We didn't think you'd mind, and we just assumed, and you're so strong you can handle it. Sometimes it comes from people you love who never once asked how you feel unless it inconvenienced them. The house was still tense. Amanda was still prickly. My parents were still oblivious. Nothing had outwardly changed. But inside, the whisper had stopped, and in its place was something steady. Not anger, not peace, clarity. It took me 3 hours to write the message. I sat at the edge of my bed, the screen of my phone glowing too bright in the dark room, editing and re-editing each line. I didn't want it to sound emotional, even though I was. I didn't want to accuse, even though I had every reason to. I just wanted Ethan to see. I started with facts. How Amanda had moved in under the guise of a few days, and was now treating my home like her own. How she rearranged furniture, dominated shared spaces, and made snide remarks with a smile. How she'd taken my car without asking. How she'd pitted my own parents against me with carefully crafted half-truths. Then I added the parts that made my chest ache to type. How I felt invisible. How I had tried, really tried to be kind. How I'd supported their relationship, helped fund their wedding, and swallowed every insult because I didn't want to make things harder for him. I ended with, "I'm not trying to ruin anything, but I can't pretend anymore. This isn't okay. And I need you to know what's happening here." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a confrontation. It was a lifeline, a request for recognition. The kind you only send when someone you love might still be capable of reaching back. I hit send at 11:17 p.m. I stared at the screen for a long time after that, waiting for the typing bubbles, for the scene notification, for anything. At 11:23 he replied, just one line. "Let's talk when I'm back." That was it. "No, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this." "No, that doesn't sound right, let's fix it." Not even a follow-up question, just, "Let's talk when I'm back." And then nothing. Not the next day, not the day after that. Days passed, each one stretching like an unanswered question. Meanwhile, Amanda became more emboldened. Her little performances sharpened. At Sunday dinner, she loudly asked my mother if she could host a bridal prep weekend in the house. "Including a few overnight guests," she said with her usual sugar-coated voice. My mother beamed. "Of course, honey, Julia won't mind." I opened my mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "I do mind," I said calmly. 3 heads turned. Amanda's smile twitched. "I work from home," I continued, "and I'm not comfortable turning this into a hotel." Amanda's eyes sparkled with challenge. "Oh, Well, I assumed since you're always so busy, you wouldn't even notice. I notice everything, I said quietly, especially what's being assumed. My father cleared his throat. Let's not do this now. And just like that, the subject changed, not because it was resolved, but because my discomfort was less important than their convenience. After dinner, I found Amanda in the kitchen. She didn't flinch when I walked in, didn't pause when she opened my cabinet and pulled down my teacup, the one I'd bought on a trip to Portland, hand-thrown clay, painted with gold flecks. "You're using my mug," I said evenly. She glanced down, then back up with a bland smile. "Oh, I didn't realize we were labeling everything now." I reached out and gently took it from her hands. "Actually, yes, we are." Amanda stared at me like I'd just broken some unspoken contract. Then she set down the spoon she'd been holding and walked away, her silence louder than any insult she'd ever flung. Later that night, I began packing a small overnight bag, not because I planned to leave, but because I realized I might have to, and I wanted to be ready, not reactive, not panicked. Ready, because if Ethan didn't respond the way I needed him to, if he came home and tried to act like all of this was a misunderstanding, then I couldn't stay. Not in this house, not in this story where I was slowly being erased. Before bed, I reread his message again. "Let's talk when I'm back." Not "I believe you." Not "that's awful." Not even "I'll handle it." Just delay, distance, detachment. The boy who once shouted in a hallway to defend me had gone quiet. And this time, I wasn't 9. This time, I wouldn't wait in the shadows of someone else's silence. The house had a strange stillness that Sunday, as if it knew something was about to be broken. Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and that too-sweet wine my father always insisted was just fine. The kind of meal meant to distract from tension by forcing everyone into the routine of passing plates and commenting on flavors. Amanda had been quiet all afternoon. No snide remarks, no martyr sighs, just silence and a strange, unblinking calm. The kind people get when they've already made up their minds. It was toward the end of dinner. I was pushing peas around my plate when Amanda put down her fork with a soft clink. "I think we need to talk about the wedding guest list," she said, eyes locked on my parents. My hand paused mid-swipe. My mother raised her brows. "What about it, sweetheart?" Amanda folded her napkin slowly, carefully, like someone building a case from linen. "I don't want Julia there." For a second, no one moved. The only sound was my father chewing, one bite, two, until he stopped too. I looked at Amanda, blinking once. "Excuse me?" She didn't even look at me. She was still speaking to my parents like I was an HR issue they needed to quietly resolve. "She makes things tense. I don't feel comfortable around her, and I don't think I should be forced to have anyone at my wedding who makes me feel unwelcome in my own home." My own home. The words landed like a slap, even though she didn't raise her voice. My chest tightened. "You mean the home I live in, that I pay for, that you moved into without asking?" Amanda finally turned to me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was worse, calculated. "You've made it clear you don't support me and Ethan. You're always cold. You make me feel judged every single day. And now you're turning the family against each other. I won't stand for it on my wedding day." I looked to my parents, waiting, hoping, begging silently for them to say something, anything that resembled defense. My mother gave me a tight smile, not the warm one she used to give me before school recitals. This one was brittle, exhausted. "Julia, honey," she said, "maybe it would be best to just sit this one out." My breath caught. "What?" My father chimed in, clearing his throat. "We just think maybe it would avoid unnecessary drama. Amanda's under a lot of pressure." "You're asking me not to come to my brother's wedding," I said, slowly, as if they hadn't heard themselves. "We're not asking," Amanda interrupted softly. "I'm telling you, don't come. I'll have you escorted out if you try." It was my mother who twisted the knife. "She's like a real daughter to us now, Julia. Maybe if you tried a little harder." I didn't hear the rest. I stood, not in a dramatic way, not with fists or screams, just stood. I walked out of the dining room, my chair creaked behind me. The sound of forks resumed as I climbed the stairs like a ghost. When I closed the door to my room, I didn't cry at first. I just stood in the center of it, surrounded by my own belongings, my own walls, my own space, and felt completely disowned. Don't come to the wedding. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had finally stopped being easy to walk over. I sat on the edge of my bed, then sank to the floor. My legs folded beneath me, arms wrapped around my chest like I could hold myself together by force. And then, finally, the tears came. Not loud, sobbing ones, not the kind you see in movies. These were quiet, shaking, grief-stricken, because it was Amanda's cruelty that broke me. It was their agreement with it. That was the betrayal, not that someone disliked me, not that Amanda saw me as competition. But that my parents, my own parents, nodded along as if I were some nuisance they hoped would quietly disappear. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for the sun to dip below the window pane, long enough for the hallway outside to fall silent. At some point, I whispered aloud to no one. They chose her. And in that moment, something inside me clicked, not shattered, not broke, but hardened. It was no longer about being liked. It wasn't even about being included. It was about dignity. And from that moment forward, I would not ask for what should be mine by default. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Late afternoon. The air outside still clung to the heavy hush that followed Texas rain. I was in the kitchen, staring blankly at a pot of tea I'd steeped and never poured when the front door creaked open. Ethan. Sunburned, exhausted. His boots heavy on the floor. He dropped his duffel beside the coat rack like he always did, then looked up and saw me. We stared at each other for one suspended breath. Then he said softly, "Hey, Jules." I didn't answer. He stepped closer, scanning my face as if trying to calculate what he'd missed while staring at sand and rocks across the world. "You look tired," he said. I almost laughed. I wanted to say, "You missed a war, Ethan. I've been fighting it with a fork and a smile." But I didn't. Instead, I motioned toward the back porch. "We need to talk." He followed without argument. Outside, the wind smelled of wet bark and memory. We sat on the old bench swing, the one we used to push each other on when we were kids. It creaked beneath our weight like it remembered who we were and couldn't understand who we'd become. "I sent you a message," I began. "I got it," he replied quickly. "I wanted to wait until I got home to talk. I didn't want to handle this over texts." I looked at him hard. "Amanda told me not to come to the wedding." He didn't flinch. "I know." That stung more than I expected. "And our parents agreed with her." "I know," he said again, softer this time. I waited for an explanation, for defense, for anything. But he just sat there, jaw tight, eyes somewhere in the trees. "Do you want me there?" I asked finally. "At your wedding?" His eyes snapped back to mine. "Of course I do, you're my sister." "That didn't stop any of them," I whispered. "Not her, not Mom, not Dad. No one hesitated. No one asked if I was okay." He rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. "Amanda's been under a lot of stress." I held up a hand. Don't explain her to me. I know exactly who she is, and I'm not asking you to fix it. I just need to know if you believe me." The wind rustled the trees. "I believe you," he said quietly. Finally, I stared at him for a long time. "She moved into my home, ignored my boundaries, manipulated our parents, and played the victim so convincingly that somehow I became the villain in my own house." He closed his eyes. "Jules, I'm sorry. Do you know what that dinner felt like?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "Hearing my own mother call her a daughter and tell me to sit this one out, it was like being told out loud that I don't matter anymore." Ethan's face crumpled. Not with guilt, something deeper. Recognition. "I had no idea it got that bad," he murmured. "You weren't here." "I should have been. But you were." He looked down, nodding slowly. "You're right." We sat in silence for a long time, not the kind we used to share when we were close, but a new one, heavier, more grown-up, more broken. Finally, he said, "I'll take care of it." I didn't ask what that meant, because for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to be the one to fix what was broken. He stood and reached for his phone. "I need to send a message." I watched him disappear inside the house. Seconds passed, then minutes. Then the ping of my phone buzzed in my pocket. One line in the family group chat. "Wedding canceled, please respect our privacy." I stared at the words, not because they shocked me, but because they didn't. My phone started buzzing. Mom, Dad, Amanda, one after the other. I didn't answer. I walked back inside, turned off the kettle, and finally poured myself the tea. It had gone cold. But somehow it still tasted like peace. It was early morning when the knock came. Not the kind that's polite or uncertain. It was deliberate. 3 firm raps, like someone wasn't just announcing their presence. They were asking for entrance to something deeper. I was in the living room, curled on the couch with my second cup of coffee, the silence still fresh after the storm Ethan had dropped into the family chat the night before. Wedding canceled. 2 words that echoed louder than any argument we'd ever had. My parents hadn't stopped calling. My father left a voicemail sounding tight and stunned. My mother texted me 3 times in a row. "We just want to talk. Please don't let this ruin everything." But the door wasn't them. I opened it, and there stood Ethan and Amanda. My eyes went straight to hers. No makeup this time. Her face was blotchy, her mascara streaked in uneven smudges like rain trails down a painted wall. She clutched something in her hands, a folded piece of paper, edges crumpled. Ethan cleared his throat. "She wanted to come." Amanda didn't say anything right away. Then quietly she stepped forward. "I was scared of losing him," she said, voice cracked. "And I thought if you were out of the picture, he'd fully be mine." There it was, not cloaked, not sugar-coated, just bare. I didn't speak, because there's something sacred about silence when the truth finally shows itself. Amanda looked down at the paper she held. "I wrote something. I didn't know how to say it to your face without messing it up." She unfolded it, hands shaking, but Ethan reached out and gently lowered it. "Let her choose," he said to her. "Don't perform this, just let it be real." Amanda's eyes glistened. She turned to me again. "I've been awful to you," she said. "I know that. I saw your strength and mistook it for threat. You had everything I wanted, independence, respect, your own space, and I let my insecurity twist it into resentment. I tried to take what wasn't mine, and when that didn't work, I tried to erase you." Tears spilled. She didn't wipe them. "I wanted your brother to pick me," she said. "I didn't realize I was asking him to lose his sister in the process." I stayed silent, because everything she said was true. And for once, no one was trying to minimize it. Ethan looked at me then, really looked. "I told her nothing moves forward unless you accept it," he said quietly. "Not the wedding, not anything. This house, your space, has been treated like a war zone, and I didn't stop it. I failed you." My throat burned. I glanced down, my feet on the hardwood floor, the same spot I used to sit cross-legged with coloring books while Ethan explained the planets. The same hallway where my parents used to hang our school photos, side by side. I looked back at Amanda. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen," I said. "I'm not going to hug you and erase what you did." Amanda nodded, eyes wide. "I wouldn't ask you to. But if you mean this apology, really mean it, then you need to show it with time, not tears, not letters." I took the paper from her hand, not to read it, just to hold it, to make her feel the weight of offering it. Amanda nodded again. "Okay. I don't forgive you," I said. "Not yet. I understand. But I see that you came here, and that matters." We stood there, 3 people on a front porch, all trying to unlearn their roles in an old, broken story. I stepped back. "You can come in." Amanda blinked. "Really?" "Yes, but not as a bride trying to win, as a person trying to make it right." She crossed the threshold like someone entering a cathedral, and I let her. Not because I was ready to rebuild everything, but because I was ready to stop being the one who always left the room so others could stay comfortable. This time they had come to my door, and this time I would decide who got to stay. There's something strangely ceremonial about setting the table for a dinner you didn't plan. Plates, napkins, silverware, all lined up like pieces in a game you no longer agree to play. I watched my mother move with robotic grace, placing wine glasses like they were apologies. Amanda stood nearby, unusually quiet, folding cloth napkins like each crease might earn forgiveness. Everyone was there, even Ethan, who stood behind his chair like a soldier waiting to be summoned. I took the same seat I always did, third from the right, not at the head, never at the head. That seat was for my father, then Amanda's voice, then no one in particular. But tonight, before anyone could reach for a chair, Ethan cleared his throat and said, "Actually, Julia should sit at the head." Every movement in the room stopped. My mother's hand froze mid-reach for the salad bowl. My father looked up from his glass. Amanda said nothing. I stared at Ethan. He didn't smile. He didn't push. He just looked at me like it was obvious, so I walked over, slowly, and sat. The wood felt no different. The chair creaked the same, but something shifted. Maybe it was the air. Maybe it was the way everyone looked toward me now instead of past me. Ethan sat beside me, Amanda across. No one touched their forks. He spoke first. "If you love me," he said, "you love my sister, period." It was quiet for a long time. My mother opened her mouth, maybe to defend herself, maybe to deflect, but Ethan raised a hand. No more gaslighting, no more maybe she misunderstood or Amanda's just stressed. Julia told the truth. You just didn't want to hear it. I watched Amanda's fingers curl slightly around her napkin, but she didn't look away. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the letter, the one she'd brought to the house the day before, and slid it across the table. I know I can't fix this in a night, she said, but I want to start. I looked down at the envelope. It had my name on it, written in her handwriting, the kind of cursive that wanted to be taken seriously. I didn't touch it. Not yet. My mother spoke then. Julia, we didn't realize how far things had gone. We were just trying to keep things calm. I looked up at her. You chose calm over clarity. Her face crumpled, but I didn't look away. You gave her the language of daughter before you gave me the courtesy of a conversation. My father cleared his throat. We were wrong. 3 words I had waited 30 years to hear. Amanda finally whispered, I wanted to win, that's the truth. I saw your confidence, your space, your voice, and I felt small, so I acted big. That was the first honest thing she'd ever said to me. I still don't trust you, I replied. But I see you're trying, and that's something. A tear slid down her cheek, and for once it didn't annoy me, because it wasn't manipulative, it was human. Ethan raised his glass then, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement. To the people who stand by us even when it's hard. I didn't raise mine right away, because for the first time I wanted to feel it first. Then I lifted my glass, clinked it gently against his, and said, to the ones who refused to be erased. Everyone echoed the toast, but softly. Dinner went on. Laughter didn't come easily. No jokes were made, but there was something else in the air space, for truth, for tension, for repair. Amanda passed me the mashed potatoes without comment. My mother asked if I wanted more wine. My father thanked me for cooking, even though I hadn't. Small things. But for me, it wasn't about being loved loudly anymore. It was about being seen clearly. And I was finally, undeniably, sitting where I belonged. The invitation came in a white envelope with silver foil lettering and a pressed wildflower tucked inside. No drama, no performance, just a card. My name spelled correctly. And a note scribbled in the corner in Amanda's now familiar handwriting. Only if you want to be there. It was 3 months after the dinner. 3 months of tentative conversations, small gestures, and a kind of quiet truce built not on pretending, but on practice. I hadn't made it easy. I hadn't rushed into bonding. But Amanda didn't run either. She asked questions now. She paused before speaking. She even laughed at herself once when she burned a casserole and admitted she used to judge me for being too controlling in the kitchen. And now look at me, she said, fanning the smoke detector. Begging for your lasagna recipe like a peasant. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The wedding was small this time, intimate, outdoors beneath a sweeping oak tree behind a local winery on the outskirts of Wimberley, wildflowers in mason jars, a linen-draped arch, nothing fancy, nothing performative. I arrived early by request. Amanda met me near the tent, nerves in her fingers and a clipboard in her hands. I need help deciding if these centerpieces are too much, she said, holding up 2 versions with an anxious frown. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I believed her. Not just the question, the invitation into it. She wanted me there, not to control me, not to prove anything, she just wanted me. They're both fine, I said. Pick the one that makes you smile when no one's looking. She blinked at me, then chose the one with the peonies. The ceremony was simple. Ethan looked at her like she was the only heartbeat in the world. Amanda cried halfway through her vows. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. And me? I sat in the front row, not hidden, not pitied, just present. After the toasts, after the first dance, Ethan raised his glass again, this time with a grin I hadn't seen in years. I want to thank someone who saved this marriage before it even began, he said, looking straight at me. My sister, Julia. Everyone turned. I felt my pulse in my ears. Ethan smiled. She told the truth even when it cost her. She defended her space, her voice, and our history. And because of her, we learned how to start over honestly. Amanda and I owe everything to her grace and her refusal to disappear. Amanda stood beside him, glass raised too. Because of Julia, she added, I learned something I didn't know I needed, a sister who challenges me to be better. There it was, no dramatics, no spotlight grab, just honesty clinked gently into crystal. After the toast, Amanda found me at the bar, no entourage, no script, just her. She held up her glass. To the person I almost lost before I realized I needed her. I clinked mine gently. To the version of us that didn't exist before the truth. We drank in silence. Then we danced. Not a lot, just one slow song. Her rhythm awkward, mine rusty, but we smiled. And for the first time, it didn't feel fake. Later that night, as the stars took their places overhead and the DJ played something mellow, I stood at the edge of the dance floor watching them, Ethan and Amanda, twirling slowly in their second attempt at forever. And I realized this wasn't about being right. It wasn't even about being forgiven. It was about belonging on your own terms. And I had done that. I had defended my name, my space, and my story. And somehow, in doing so, I'd given the people around me permission to find their truer selves, too. If someone had told me back then that Amanda and I would one day co-sign legal documents, run staff meetings, and debate nonprofit tax language over coffee, I would have laughed, or cried, or both. But here we were, 4 years later, standing in heels on a stage under twinkling lights, smiling for the press cameras as the banner behind us read, "Women Rise! Empowering equity from inside the home outward." A gala. Our gala. Amanda looked radiant in navy. I wore a black jumpsuit and earrings I'd borrowed from her drawer, the same drawer I once considered burning. She stepped to the microphone first. "Most of you know we co-founded this nonprofit after what some might call a complicated family start," she began to polite chuckles. "But truthfully, what brought Julia and me together wasn't drama. It was dignity, hers, mine, and the understanding that we all deserve to live where our voices matter." I watched the audience nod. Young women, older women, a few supportive husbands in tuxedos. I stepped up next, clearing my throat, feeling the weight of every year since that porch conversation. "I used to believe keeping the peace meant staying quiet," I said. "But silence isn't harmony. It's just someone else's comfort paid for by your discomfort." Murmurs of agreement. What Amanda and I built, this organization, this mission, started not with strategy but with pain, and then with choice. We chose to rebuild. We chose to listen harder than we defended, and we chose to stop being erased. Applause rose, soft and steady. We ended with a toast. I raised my glass and looked at Amanda. She grinned. "To the women who refused to vanish. And to the ones still learning how not to," I added. Afterward, while the band played soft jazz and guests mingled, Ethan found us backstage. He looked like someone who carried pride in his chest instead of guilt in his shoulders now. "You two nearly killed each other over kitchen counters," he joked, raising a glass. "Now you run an empire." Amanda rolled her eyes playfully. "It was mostly her counters, I just touched them," I laughed. "And I nearly changed the locks." We clinked glasses. There were no lingering shadows between us anymore. No unspoken tension, just history and growth. After the gala, Amanda and I walked out to the parking lot barefoot, shoes in hand, champagne bubbles still fizzing in our heads. "You remember when you said you'd have me kicked out of the wedding?" I asked, not bitter, just amused. Amanda groaned. "Don't remind me, I still get flashbacks." "I almost packed up and left that night," I said, looking at the stars. "Like for good." She stopped walking. Turned to me. "What made you stay?" I thought about it. "The part of me that knew I hadn't done anything wrong." Amanda nodded slowly. "I'm glad you didn't leave," she said, "because I would have never known what I was missing." I smiled. "I didn't know I needed a sister until I nearly lost one," she added, her voice quieter now. We stood there for a moment. Two women who had once been enemies by default, now standing shoulder to shoulder, not because blood demanded it, but because choice did. We had rebuilt something no wedding planner could have designed, no family dinner could have faked. We had rewritten our roles, not bride and villain, not perfect daughter and disappointment, just women, real, resilient, reconnected. And when I drove home that night, I passed the old family house. Lights off, porch swings still creaking in the wind. And I smiled, because the girl who once whispered in corners had grown into a woman who knew how to roar without raising her voice. Where are you watching this story from? Drop your city in the comments. Like, comment, and share if this story made you feel something. What would you have done if you were Julia? Thank you for staying with Julia's journey. A new story will follow soon.